Good morning and welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Hawk Blogger, and it's a special Tuesday. I think victory Mondays are one thing, but when you've had a 3-game losing streak and then you blow out a division leading Falcons by 20 points on the road, it's a victory every day. You savor those days, you savor those weeks, and on this episode, we're going to get to start with our good buddy, Mike Randle of FTN Fantasy. Mike, how are you doing?
Doing well, sir. That was a good win across the board. Dominant performance. We were on that a little bit. Kenneth Walker was a little banged up, but we're concerned that sick coming in, but showed no ill effects. Great win. Fingers crossed DK Metcalf seems okay. But overall, that was a very, very nice road win.
Yeah, it was, something that felt possible, but it felt like very unrealistic or irrational to expect it, given the way the Seahawks had performed, especially on defense over the last few weeks or last few games, I should say. I got to ask, Mike, what is the mood in Jersey around the Jets? Like, are people losing their minds up there?
Yeah, it just seems like, Brian, they're grasping at straws right now. Devontae Adams comes in. It's going to take time for him to acclimate, but bad defensive performance. I mean, it feels like the Jets were relying on their defense all the way through the season, and now all of a sudden the defense against Russell Wilson, who looked very efficient, but certainly should not have been able to move the ball. Guys wide open in the middle of the field, down the sideline. I mean, he put Russell Wilson, the reason he's starting, Brian, is for the one play he threw to George Pickens in the end zone. He came down, he saw Pickens on the right side, wasn't sure if they were double teaming him. He told the player to go in motion, got one-on-one, threw the ball to Pickens for the touchdown. That level of quarterback play is why they have him in there. He can't throw the ball like Justin Fields can. You can see some of his balls were dying, but he's a very savvy, smart quarterback, and that's what they want. But the Jets, they got a big performance from Breece Hall. That was a bad loss. And they have the pieces. They have Wilson, they have Adams, they have Breece Hall, but it's not working. It is a sinking ship right now, and they are desperate.
Well, Mike, I'm kind of curious. I didn't give you prep on this, so feel free to punt it. But as far as guys jumping out at you around the league, guys that have started to make plays that Seahawks fans might want to be aware of, or fantasy football fans might want to be aware of, are there any new names that have started to emerge, or maybe old names that have started to kind of realize their potential?
Yeah, it was interesting to look at the players that have sort of come to the forefront now after a while. And I think early on, people were wondering, how are players going? Players who have been struggling, like a Mark Andrews, for example, are they going to be able to come back and be able to put some points up? And they have, and they've started to play. I mean, the Ravens have been fantastic. And we liked Derrick Henry here at FTN at the beginning of the year as an early round running back, basically because, Brian, I don't think you can trust any running back, as you can see with Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, to get 10 touchdowns, no problem. But he's been even better than expected, to be honest, with that performance. And you've seen them play well now. Even Jacksonville, some of those players started to get going, like an Evan Ingram. So you've started to see players across the league start to play well, even if they've gotten off to slow starts. And the miracle of all miracles, as you know, is that somehow Patrick Mahomes, with 6 touchdowns and 8 interceptions, is a top player betting-wise for the MVP, and the Chiefs are still undefeated. So Players that have struggled early, like a Mark Andrews, have started to come around here. Who knows what's going to happen with the Browns with Nick Chubb? Even the Bengals offense has started to get going. So those that we expected to do well, even if they got off to slow starts, are starting to click a little bit in fantasy football.
Yeah, and Mike, it's kind of a fascinating time here in the NFC West. The Seahawks. I'm going to do after you and I finish our segment, I'm going to do a roundup of what's happened so far and what's to come with the NFC West. And as I look at the DVOA over at FTN fantasy.com right now, 49ers are 9th. And I got to wonder how that's going to go. The Seahawks are 11th in DVOA. Then you get down to Arizona at 20th and the Rams at 22nd. Every team in the division's below 500 other than the Seahawks. And as we get into looking at the FTN betting model for this week, I'll throw this up so people can see what we're seeing. The Seahawks right here are going up against the Bills this week. And the model, currently the Bills are favored by 3 points, which I think is appropriate. And the model is expecting the Bills to win this one. It's got them projected at about 24, 25 points and the Seahawks at 23. So relatively close game, at least from the model perspective. No clear edge one way or another on this game. Any thoughts for you on this matchup between the Seahawks and the Bills?
Yeah, every week I do a money line underdog or two. The argument is those are higher odd games, so you're going to get more value if you hit. So you don't have to win at the normal 56, 58% in order to grind out a profit. And my pick this week, I already put it in, I posted on FTN Fantasy, is Seattle to win this game outright against Buffalo. We have a 3.3% edge right now, getting 3. If that goes up to 3.5, which is critical, that would be a big edge here. This is a Buffalo team that on the road is allowing over 150 rushing yards per game on the road. Running backs have had tremendous success. We use our DVOA adjusted fantasy points against tool, where adjusted means you adjust for strength of the opponent. Of course, if you played a lot of passing teams, you're going to allow passing yardage, but adjusting for the strength of opponent. And Buffalo is brutal. 32% allowed more fantasy points to opposing running backs. So wheels up here for Kenneth Walker. So there are opportunities for, I think, Seattle to play well. You know about the defense. You mentioned it got healthy, got some pressure last week, got some sacks against Kirk Cousins. This is a spot that I think Seattle can do very well. Yes, I know Buffalo looked good against Tennessee at home, but Tennessee sort of was off to a good start in that game. Now you're coming against the 12th man. You're coming to Seattle, who, again, as the wins go back and forth, have improved and started to play well again. DK Metcalf is the big question mark, but you have enough weapons here, especially in the backfield, to beat this Bills team at home.
That's interesting, Mike. There's so much data at FTN Fantasy. I hadn't even seen this part of the site yet. As folks know, I'm a subscriber. You absolutely should be as well. You can get a discounted membership over at ftnfantasy.com. Use promo code HBAM. It's 15% off. Special deal, 15% off for Hawk Blogger listeners, and it's less than $8 a month for FTN Plus. You get Stats Hub, you get DVOA, you get all the betting model, you get access to Discord channels, you can get fantasy football information. It's like the absolute central place to get all your information and data for NFL, for insights, all that stuff. I use it all the time. So highly recommend it. This is cool. So running backs have done pretty well against the Bills, and then wide receiver twos as well have done well against the Bills, which is an interesting insight.
Yeah, and Brian, if you look at that, they've been very good, the Bills, against opposing wide receiver ones. They're allowing 26% fewer fantasy points to wide receiver ones. Here's my point. Even if DK Metcalf, if it doesn't play, I don't know if the Bills know how to adjust. Like, who is the wide receiver one then going to be for Seattle? I think sometimes when you take the expected person out of the lineup, although DK is wonderful, it does create some interesting situations that their offense, which is very explosive, can take advantage of. But that running back matchup is going to be key for you this week. The only team that has allowed more adjusted fantasy points against is Carolina at 48% above average. Buffalo is even worse than New England at 23%. Buffalo's at 32%. So you need to control the ball, limit turnovers, of course, get some pressure. And I think you're right there.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the rushing totals against the Bills this year. Obviously, Derrick Henry had the massive game in Baltimore, 199 yards, 8.3 yards a carry. Breece Hall, more recently, of the Jets, had 113 yards, 6.3 yards a carry. Devon Achane had 96 yards, 4.4 yards per carry. So those are some big totals for an individual running back, and that does not include, the receiving yards, where Breece Hall had 5 catches for 56 yards in addition, and Achane had 7 catches for 69 yards in addition. So they have been pretty porous against the running back.
Yeah, Brian, even Jacksonville, the game got away from them there, obviously. They were having a lot of success early. Look at Travis Etienne. He had 6.1 yards per carry in that game, even Tank Bigsby. So everyone's been able to run on Buffalo. The key is you don't want to give them too many turnovers. And on the flip side, I think you have to try to stop the big play against those Buffalo receivers. Keon Coleman has come into his own. He's still a rookie, but if you look at his numbers, yes, he had 125 receiving yards last week. He got 50 of them on one play. So he's been they've been vulnerable to the big play. Amari Cooper is there now. That's a new variable for them. But they've opened up with big plays with Coleman and Shakir under sort of the short to intermediate area. So I think Seattle will do very well there. You just have to get pressure on Josh Allen. And my big thing that I put in the article, Brian, Josh Allen has turnover issues. He always has his whole career. He has 12 touchdowns and no interceptions, despite the fact that he has a 3.2% turnover-worthy throw rate here at FTN, meaning that he is throwing passes that could be turnovers. No one has been able to get him, though. That rate is actually higher than Joe Burrow. It's higher. Even Aaron Rodgers has a lower turnover-worthy throw rate at 2.8%. He has 7 interceptions. So those sort of things tend to regress. There's opportunity here. Would not be surprised for Seattle to get not 1, but 2 turnovers on Allen on Sunday to get a nice home win here as an underdog.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Had not known that. This is the kind of insight we love to get from you, Mike, and FTN. So appreciate that. I was looking at receivers. You mentioned wide receiver twos. The receivers that have had decent days against the Bills, Allen Lazard and Garrett Wilson, both went over 100 yards in that game. For the Jets, Stephon Diggs had 82 yards. Christian Kirk of the Jags had 79 yards. Justice Hill of Baltimore had 78. Nico Collins had 78. So not a lot of like huge days, but it seems like the ground game and the running back position is certainly the bigger potential weakness. As far as passing yards go, CJ Stroud put up 331 yards against the Bills in a game that the Texans won. And Aaron Rodgers put up 294 yards. Besides that, Mason Rudolph was the highest, and that was just last week with the Titans, had 215 yards. And they actually got out to a 10-0 lead before things just completely fell apart for what is not a very good Tennessee team. So as we look around the rest of the NFC West, because that's what I'm going to spend time on here in just a bit, we look at the betting model. The Arizona Cardinals win last night. They get their win, and they are going to be playing the Miami Dolphins in Miami, and they get some bad luck because Tua Tagovailoa is back, or expected to be back in that game. Everyone else has been playing the bootleg version of the Dolphins. Right now, the Dolphins are 3.5-point favorites in that game. And there is a pretty big edge to Miami. Talk about that game for a second, Mike.
Yeah, the Dolphins are a team that we consistently see undervalued. And what happens, Brian, is sometimes the record does not reflect what we see. That was a Miami game. They missed a field goal to make it 13-13. That was our biggest edge last week, and it didn't work out because the Colts go down, kick a field goal, and end up getting the win 16-10. But we do see opportunity with Miami with this team because, honestly, their explosiveness in that offense should be a lot better. Look at Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. You're telling me that with a bye week and Tyler Huntley under center, and I know that he's limited, you can get more than 1 reception for Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So obviously their offense is anemic right now. They need some help, and they should get it when Tua comes back. And people can forget, because of recency bias, just how good this offense can be. So we have an edge there as well. We think that Miami is going to bounce back, should have bounced back against Anthony Richardson and the Colts, but just didn't happen. Couple turnovers, weird things that happened that should not have, most it with a fumble as well. So yeah, Miami is a team that's undervalued, and we're seeing, an edge there in that matchup because they should have their way with Arizona. Last night, Arizona is decent against the run. They were able to limit J.K. Dobbins. Chargers just don't have enough offensive weapons on the outside to move the ball. They still almost got the win, but they couldn't contain Murray for the touchdown and then the dump off to James Conner late. So there's opportunity against the Cardinals. If you can pass the ball with Tua back under center, the Dolphins can do just that.
The Rams, everyone's counted them out, and it's understandable with some of the injuries that they've had and the start that they've had, but they do win against the Raiders. It wasn't a pretty win, but they won. And now they've got a Thursday night game at home against the Minnesota Vikings. Interestingly, I mean, as expected, the Vikings are favored by between 3 and 3.5 points. But the model's not so sure that that's going to be the outcome of this game. What are your thoughts there?
It's Sam Darnold. It goes back to the turnover-worthy throws that we talked about, Brian, with Josh Allen. I think that Sam Darnold, they've been one of the luckiest teams, Minnesota, because Darnold has had a lot of turnovers. They have the third highest turnover rate of any NFL team, but it's not costing them. They lost to the Lions last week, but this is a Rams offense that could get Cooper Kupp back. It's on the road. It's a short week. Kyron Williams has been fantastic for the Rams. Yes, the Vikings defense has been legit, but you can move the ball on them a little bit, especially at home. The key is Sam Darnold. It's that we expect regression. It's very hard in fantasy football to drop someone or bench someone who is playing well, or to play someone or pick up someone who's not playing well. But that's where the value is. If you can look beyond that, Sam Darnold is what we know he is. He's been off to a great start. The regression is coming, and those turnovers are going to hurt them at some point. Could be this week on a short week on the road against a Ram team that's well coached.
All right. Last thing, Mike, the 49ers, so sad that they dropped that game to the Chiefs. I felt so bad for them. And now they welcome in the Cowboys, and the model that, like, the Cowboys are on hard times themselves. They're coming off a bye week, though. This is a win it or your season's over. Your owner has been threatening to fire radio hosts. I mean, it's a desperate time. But the model, does it understand that Brandon Ayuk was just lost? Does it understand the state of the 49ers right now? Because right now it seems pretty confident the 49ers are going to win this one going away.
We're going to adjust that as the week goes on. So once we get clarity and get more insight, it will adjust. This is including for Brandon Ayuk, but it is not including for Deebo Samuel, which is still very questionable. And George Kittle was banged up. So what you'll see sometimes is we don't have a total edge secure until later in the week when you get the injury reports. But this does account for Ayuk. The problem is Dallas's defense is just broke. I mean, how bad does that week 2 blowout look to the Saints now, Brian, at home? So Dallas has not been great either. Their entire offense runs through CeeDee Lamb. They can't run the ball, but to your point, San Francisco is really struggling. I saw a tweet come out, not funny that it happened, but ironic that the healthiest receiver right now for the Niners was Ricky Pearsall, who, of course, thank God, was shot a couple weeks ago because Deebo has pneumonia. Ayuk's out for the year. They're really struggling right now on offense. So this is an interesting game. Right now, we have an over edge at 10%, and we have the Niners with a 4.99% edge to win the game. But that's more because of the Cowboys than it is the Niners. They are struggling right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as I said before, if you haven't already gone over to ftnfantasy.com, use promo code HBAM to get 15% off. You should. I'm a subscriber. I love having access. I think a lot of you have already subscribed. It's less than $8 a month for FTN Plus, gets you DVOA, gets you Stats Hub, gets you all this amazing insights. And the Discord channel is great as well for any questions you got about betting or fantasy. So Mike, man, thank you so much for coming on again. It's always great to see you. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Cheers to you and the Seahawks fans. Let's get a big money line underdog win this week.
We'll try to win you some money, dude. All right. That was Mike Randle of FTN Fantasy. Always great to have Mike aboard. And some interesting insights there. I got to say, I hadn't known that about Josh Allen and his situation with turnover-worthy throws. And as Mike was talking, I checked it in a couple different places just for my own point of view and learning. And sure enough, Josh Allen has the tied for 4th highest turnover-worthy play rate in the NFL this year, behind only Jalen Hurts, Kirk Cousins, and Dak Prescott. He has thrown 10 turnover-worthy plays. Of the players that have a turnover-worthy play rate, quarterbacks that have a turnover-worthy play rate of over, really of anything. He's basically of anyone over, let's say, 3.8%. He is the only one that has 0 interceptions. He is the only one that has fewer than 4 interceptions. So he is absolutely getting away with some things, and it's going to be interesting to find out whether the Seahawks can be the team that turns into the opportunistic team after having so few balls bounce their way in the first part of this season, they got a couple throws to go their way. They got a couple calls to go their way. I mean, I think it's always as the victor, you don't really pay attention to some of the calls, but I felt like the Seahawks were very fortunate. There was the pass interference. That was a bad call late in the game that the refs ended up picking up, saying it was incidental contact, which it was. But how often do you see refs actually discuss a DPI call and pick up the flag? It doesn't happen very often. There were a few other calls that I felt like the Seahawks got some benefit. There's obviously the mistakes that the Falcons made with their roughing the passer plays, some really stupid plays that they made. So the Seahawks got some good luck in that game as well. And you kind of need it. You need it. Unless you're just a dominant team, you need some things to kind of go your way. So what I wanted to spend the rest of the show on is kind of catching us up on where we are with the NFC West. And I'm going to do this in a few different ways. There's a bunch of ways to go through this, but what I'm going to start with is we're just going to get to know where they are schedule-wise, what the results have been so far, and what is going to be the future. Before I do that, if you guys don't know, if you're in the area and you want to watch tonight, 7:30 p.m. Pacific time, I will be on Fox, local Fox affiliate, with Aaron Levine doing the Fox Roundup, Sports Roundup. We'll talk. I don't know actually what it's called. I should know that. Let me. I thought maybe Fox Sports 13. 7:30. I should know the answer to that. It's kind of embarrassing that I don't, but I think that they started this show. I thought it was called the Sports Roundup, but I honestly, Sports Wrap, maybe it's Sports Wrap. I think it's Sports Wrap. Yeah. So I will be on that tonight with Aaron Levine at 7:30. So keep an eye out for that. Should be fun. And we have a couple things to talk about. So it should be enjoyable. All right, so getting to the roundup, the first thing I wanted to kind of go through is what are the schedules? What have been the results? Where do things stand? And then we're going to go into a little bit further. We'll see how much time's left over and how we're feeling about things. But first things first. So first things first, we're going to go with the Cardinals as the last team that's played. And hopefully you can get a good look at what you're seeing here. This Cardinals team, as you look at their results so far, that Bills game, pretty impressive at this point. Like, they played pretty well in that game. They had the Bills, they were beating the Bills for a while and then lost it at the end. They blew out the Rams. So they went 1-0 in the division. Big deal there. They lost a close game to the Lions the week before the Seahawks played them. And, they held the Lions without a point in the second half of that game. So that was an impressive loss, for what is looking like one of the best teams in the NFC, if not the NFL. Then they got absolutely boat raced by the Commanders. So that was their most embarrassing loss. It doesn't matter. Like, the Commanders are obviously playing well this year, but losing 42-14 at home is embarrassing regardless. And the Commanders are not that good. So that was their roughest point in the season. Then they go and they get an absolute surprise win in San Francisco to go 2-0 in the division. So this is huge for how they are looking on the season and looking forward. That's just a huge aspect of what makes the Cardinals a really dangerous team. So beyond that, they lost to the Packers. They went to the Packers, got kind of blown out 34-13. And then they just last night won 17-15. They beat the Chargers. That was a decent win. The Chargers had nobody to throw to. I mean, Will Dissly got like 75 targets last night. It was an unfortunate outcome. The Chargers had a lot of opportunities to had a lot of opportunities to win. They could not get a touchdown, but that was I think a pretty big outcome for the division and for the Cardinals that they were able to get that. They played really tough defensively, even though they lost some guys. Offensively, it was pretty ugly, but they get a Kyler Murray touchdown run that was just enough to make it possible. So they sit there at 3-4 on the season, but importantly 2-0 in the division. I see a comment in chat. Hang on. Commanders are balling. Am I crazy? I don't know how you interpreted what I was just saying, but my point there is the Commanders are not one of the top elite teams in the league. They are certainly winning games, and they are I think are the odds-on favorite to win that division in the NFC East, but their defense is absolutely awful. It is worse than the Seahawks have been performing. It's worse than a lot of others. So they are a very flawed team. But if you had lost to the Bills 42-14, if you had lost to the Lions 42-14, that would be more understandable. The Commanders, for my money, are just not that team. All right, so that's the results so far. We look ahead at what's coming for the Cardinals. And like we just talked about with Mike Randle of FTN Fantasy, they get a little bit of bad luck in that the Dolphins are getting back to a Tagovailoa. So that could be a big shot in the arm. They should be at least more dangerous. And we'll see if the Cardinals defense can hold up on the road. Then they face the Bears, a Bears team that is playing better. That's not going to be an easy game. Then they host the Jets at home. By the way, that Dolphins game's also at 10 a.m., which is makes it a little bit more challenging. So they get these next 3 games, and then they get a bye week. After that, they play the Seahawks. They come to Seattle after their bye week. So I think that that's worth noting that the Cardinals are going to have a bye week ahead of playing the Seahawks. They will be traveling here, but I think that that's a bit of an advantage for them to be aware of. Then they go to the Vikings. Very tough matchup, 10 a.m. game there. Very tough to win in Minnesota. Then they host the Seahawks. So it's going to be the Seahawks 2 out of 3 weeks, right there around Thanksgiving. So that honestly could be a stretch that determines the division, depending on how things play out. We'll look at some of these other schedules, but those 2 games in 3 weeks with the Vikings in the middle, sandwich in the middle, is a big deal. We'll see who the Seahawks have sandwiched in the middle in just a bit. After that, they host the Patriots. Then they go to the Panthers. So that's a pretty advantageous 2-game stretch there later in the season. Then they go to the Rams. Then they host the 49ers at home. And the interesting piece is that if you look at it, I mean, there's some interesting teams on there, but the Bears, the Seahawks, the Vikings are the only teams with winning records left on the Cardinals schedule. So their schedule is considered relatively easy the rest of the way by a wins and loss perspective. I look at it and say the Dolphins are not the same team that they've been probably for this game. And then we'll see about the Jets game. Who knows there? Maybe the Jets are playing a little bit better, but I think the last 2 games at the Rams and home against the 49ers, even though those teams have losing records, those could be tough for the Cardinals for sure. So of the 4 teams, the Cardinals probably have the easiest remaining schedule, and they have a 2-0 record in the division. So the Cardinals are a team to keep an eye on, even though they're flawed. Every team in this NFC West is flawed. All right, let's look at the 49ers with their cute little pink hat. And their results so far, they beat the Jets, which is looking like a not impressive win at all. They lost to the Vikings. They lost to the Rams. At least the Rams have beat another team. They beat the Raiders and they've beat the 49ers. Then they blew the doors off the Patriots. And then they lost to the Cardinals They beat the Seahawks pretty convincingly, and then they got really dominated for the most part against the Chiefs. So their wins, their only win against a team with a winning record is against the Seahawks. And I think there's some asterisks on that game, but it counts, and they were the better team, no doubt about it, in that game. Obviously, they have injury issues, but we'll talk a little bit more about their situation. But this is not an impressive, like their losses are not two impressive teams in terms of the Rams and the Cardinals. Obviously, the Vikings and the Chiefs make sense, but their wins are not particularly glowing. So we'll see about the 49ers. In terms of what they've got left, they've got this Cowboys game on Sunday night. And this is going to be huge. In a lot of ways, the 49ers should beat the Cowboys. There's a lot of reasons why. But I just wonder, like from a psychology perspective, what's the edge for the Cowboys? They're 3-3 entering this game. They got blown out by the Lions 47-9. They're coming off their bye week. And so they've had this game circled. They've lost to the 49ers time and again. Do they have it in them to rise up in this game and steal one? Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, like, can they find a way to put up enough points against this 49ers defense to win this game? Probably not, but I'm not giving up on it quite yet. So then they get a bye week, and then the 49ers go to Tampa Bay for a 10 a.m. game. And the interesting thing here is Tampa Bay they've got a really good offense this year. They're putting up a lot of points, and I assume the 49ers would be favored in that game. They might have Christian McCaffrey back for that game, but unclear. So the 49ers are going to try to get healthy after that bye week and make a closing push. After they go to the Bucs, then they host the Seahawks. So I like this. The Seahawks are going to be coming off of their bye week. The 49ers are going to be coming home from a cross-country trip against a talented Bucs team. And we'll see. Like, that could be a turning point in this division as well. Yes, the Bucs lost Godwin, the receiver. Big deal. It absolutely matters. I still think that that's a team that could give the 49ers a problem, especially with guys like Mike Evans and other folks on that roster. So they got the Seahawks at home. Then they go to the Packers. Very tough game. So that's an interesting stretch there. Then they go to the Bills. Also a tough game. That's going to be a primetime game, Sunday Night Football. Very tough game. Then they go home. They come home against the Bears. Also not an easy matchup. Then they host the Rams on Thursday Night Football. So, like, this is they're going to go not quite Monday night, but they'll go Sunday night at the Bills, come home to face the Bears, and then have a Thursday night home game against the Rams. So that's 3 games in 12 days, as opposed to the Seahawks 3 games in 11 days. But that is a tough stretch for the 49ers. At Bills, home against the Bears, home against the Rams. Then you travel to the Dolphins, and again, that could be a very different Dolphins team than what we see right now. Then you host the Lions, so they still have to face the Lions. Then you travel to Arizona. The 49ers have the toughest remaining schedule of any team in the division. All right. This is not just me saying it. It's by any, evaluation of schedules that are out there. And they are playing, let's see. I want to make sure I've got this right, but they are playing. Yeah, the Bucs still have a winning schedule, right? So they're playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams, 6 remaining teams with a winning record on their schedule. So that's a tough draw, and they've got to get healthier somehow. And they have to hope that Christian McCaffrey is a huge shot in the arm. As it stands right now, that has been just a very underperforming team. All right. So goodbye to the 49ers and their cute little hat. We'll look at the Rams. Rams are the forgotten team in this division. Not by me. They are 2-4. So far, they just are coming off their bye week, like a week ago. They lost to the Lions 26-20 in overtime. That was a very close game. And that's, I think, like, keep in mind, I think that's who the Rams might be. Like, they went toe to toe with probably the best team in the NFC in Detroit and lost by just one score in overtime. The Cardinals, they lost to them 41-10. That was obviously the most embarrassing result. And I think what left a lot of people just assuming with all the injuries that the Rams are done. But then the Rams beat the 49ers. That win changed the complexion of this whole division and this season, because now the 49ers are 1-1 in the division. 49ers are 1-2 in the division. Sorry. They started off 0-2, then they beat the Seahawks. They are 1-2 in the division. That is huge. The Cardinals, as we know, are 2-0 in the division. So now the Rams, they are 1-1. So they got their win against San Francisco. Very bizarre game, but it still counts. Then they lost at the Bears. Close game, 24-18. Then they lost at home to the Packers, 24-19. And that's not a game you should be embarrassed by. Like, the Packers are very good, and they, barely lost. And then they barely beat the Raiders, which is not good. But there's reason to think that the Rams will get Cooper Kupp back this week or soon after. I think will get Puka Nacua back. And when they start getting healthier, Matt Stafford is still a class quarterback in this division. And I just don't think that you can underestimate this Rams team. Yes, they are 2-4. They are 1-1 in the division. I think they remain dangerous. And here is their remaining schedule. The thing that is hurting the Rams is that their bye week is behind them. They have to play all of these games the rest of the way without a break. And so that starts with Thursday night this week. They host the Vikings. I think that's, if they manage to win that game, then beware. I'm hoping that they don't, obviously, but if they do, watch out. Then they go to the Seahawks. They come here to Seattle. Then they go, they have Monday night against the Dolphins at home. So they've got this Thursday, Sunday, Monday stretch where it's home against the Vikings, to Seattle, and then home for the Dolphins. Then they go to the Patriots, should be an easy one. Then they host the Eagles, who have been playing reasonably well. That's a Sunday night football game. Then they go to the Saints, which should be easy at this point. Then they host the Bills, not easy. Then they go to the 49ers. Then they go to the Jets. And by the way, that Bills home game and then 49ers road game, the 49ers game is a Thursday night game. So that's another short game. It's going to be tough in that one. Then you go to the Jets, and then you end up with two home games for the Rams, hosting the Cardinals and hosting the Seahawks. So those are going to be interesting ones, because by that point, it's possible that all four teams could be fighting for the division. And those last 2 weeks, the Rams end with home games against the Cardinals and the Seahawks. So the Rams are trying to make those games mean something. And in order to do that, I think that they're going to have that Seahawks game circled on their calendar. Certainly not this week, but next week. They will almost certainly have Cooper Kupp back for that game. Puka Nacua should be close behind. So that's where I think the Rams are a dark horse to get back into this race. As far as teams left on their schedule with a winning record, You've got Minnesota, Seattle twice, the Eagles, the Bills, and that's it. So how many games left against teams with winning record? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games. 5 games left against teams with winning records. So kind of a middle of the road, not easy, not super tough finishing slate, but they've got some of their toughest games remaining. The Bills, the Eagles, the Vikings. I think those are all very tough games for the Rams. So this Vikings game is absolutely crucial on Thursday. The outcome of that will really have a large say in whether the Rams get back into this race or whether they are just going to be chasing it the whole year. All right, finally, our hometown Seahawks. We know their results so far. They won 3, they lost 3, and then they blew out the Falcons on the road to give everybody a little bit more hope and a little bit more reason to pay attention. So what's remaining? Let's talk about the remaining look for the Seahawks. They face the Bills this week at home. Then they host the Rams. So this is a little mini, it gives them a break in the season in terms of travel. Then they get the bye week. So from a rest perspective, from a travel perspective, this is one of the more advantageous periods in the Seahawks schedule because they're going to have a lot of road games the rest of the year. So this is a chance for them to get a little bit, I don't know about healthy, but get a little bit more practice in, a little bit more time together, a little bit more routine, sleeping in your bed, eating your food, going to the VMAC, like all that should be a little bit more regimented than it is when you're traveling every other week. So then they get their bye, and then they go to San Francisco. Very beneficial that the Seahawks and their coaching staff gets a full bye week to prepare for that game. That game is huge. And it's really this 2-game stretch of the Rams and the 49ers. Home against the Rams, bye week, and then at 49ers. I think that's, and remember, San Francisco is going to be coming back from an East Coast trip to Tampa Bay. I like that game against San Francisco. I'm not scared to say it. It doesn't mean I'm saying it's a certain win, but I like the Seahawks' chances in that game. So you get 3 division games in a row. You get home against the Rams, at the 49ers, and then home against the Cardinals. That stretch will determine whether or not the Seahawks are the division winners. If you go 2-1 in that, right now the Seahawks are 0-1 in the division. If they go 2-1 in that stretch, they will be 2-2 in the division. But they would also be, at least have 6 wins. And let's say for a second the Bills game is a loss. Let's just say it's a loss. I don't want it to be a loss, but let's say it is. Then they would be 6-5 at that point. I'm not sure if that's enough to really put them where they need to be. If they can somehow win those 3 games, I know that's asking a lot, but only one of them's on the road, and that one comes after a bye week. If you can win your 2 home games against the Rams and the Cardinals, which I think is a realistic thing to expect, then you can be talking about, let's assume a conservative thing with the Bills losing to the Bills. That would make you 7-4. If you win those 3 division games, it would make you 3-1 in the division. And I think it would put you in a absolutely great situation to win the division, win the NFC West. So I know it's a lot to ask. I think the Seahawks can win those 3 games in a row. Each of them are going to be tough in their own right, but 2 of them are at home. So this is a big part. That, right now, we are in a absolutely pivotal part of the season. That win against the Falcons was huge. The Seahawks had been 0-3 in the NFC in the conference. Now at least they have a win. We'll always bemoan that Giants loss. That will be a problem forever, but it is what it is. So after that 3 division games, they go to the Jets for a 10 a.m. game. This will be interesting because the Jets are not like that great of a team, but maybe they'll be better. Maybe Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers will, hook up a little bit more. Maybe things will improve. It seems like a dumpster fire a little bit. So, who knows? That's a hard one to project right now. That looks like a winnable game. And that's their first like road game in weeks, like months, that will be real travel. The road game to the 49ers is like an hour flight. I mean, not a big deal. You don't change time zones. That will be a big game. This will be after Thanksgiving. So, traveling to New York, that could be an interesting one. Then they go to the Cardinals. So 2 straight road games. You come back from New York, then you go. That Cardinals game is going to be rough. It's not a lot of travel, but coming back from the East Coast and then going back to Arizona back-to-back weeks, that's tough. Winning would help, but that's going to be a big one. And I think the Cardinals are going to have a reasonable advantage in that one. Then the Seahawks host the Packers on Sunday Night Football. That's a very tough game. I don't think the Seahawks match up well, but again, we don't exactly know what the Seahawks are going to look like at that point. You could be talking about a very different offensive line. You could be talking about a very different defense. You can be talking about Rayshon Jenkins being back. You could talk about, who knows, if Uchenna Nwosu, when he could potentially be back. So lots of things could be different by then, but that's a tough one. That stretch there against the NFC North, 3 games in a row, is rough. Home Sunday Night Football against the Packers, home against the Vikings, and then at the Bears on Thursday Night Football. That's rough. That's rough. And so, I don't know. I mean, I think it's very realistic that the Seahawks lose all 3 of those games. I think you'd have to expect that the Seahawks will lose all 3 of those games. The most winnable might be the home game against the Packers, maybe the home game against the Vikings, depending on how things play out with where the offense is and where the offensive line is. But, at least 2 of them are at home. But those are tough teams. I got a lot of respect for those teams. And who knows how well the Bears will be playing by that point. And traveling on the road, long trip to Chicago for a Thursday night game, that one's real tough. And then they finish the season at the Rams. So they finish the season both with 2 road games. The nice thing there is they will at least get a mini bye week before that final game against the Rams. And that's not a tough trip down to LA, but you'll get an extra bit of rest. Would not shock me at all if you're talking about a 3-game losing streak for the Seahawks. Maybe even a 4-game if they lose that game at the Cardinals beforehand. So this is going to be a bumpy road. It's going to be a bumpy road. The Seahawks have, in terms of teams with winning records the rest of the way, they've got the Bills, they've got the Packers, the Vikings, the Bears. So they only have 4 games against teams with winning records. It feels like a tougher schedule than that. But that's because so many division games remain. So many road games remain. And so the Seahawks have some work to do there. Good news is the Seahawks are 2-1 away so far this year. They're only 2-2 at home. So they have not been able to really take their home field advantage and really get what you're looking for out of that. So where does all this leave us? I mean, what I see with this division is that you've got a Seahawks team that is enjoying a 1-game lead. Their next closest teams are the Arizona Cardinals and the San Francisco 49ers. The Cardinals, I don't know if there's any new injuries out of last night. In fact, I'm going to take a quick look to see if anything came out of that game, because they had a lot of guys kind of hop off. But between the Cardinals and the 49ers, Cardinals have the easier schedule. They have, I think, a team that's playing with a little bit more spirit and belief. And the 49ers, they like Christian McCaffrey, offensive player of the year last year. He's a huge thing. If they can get him back, who knows what kind of player he will be, if he'll be the same guy. Who knows how the rest of the team is going to hold up. But if the 49ers lose this week to the Cowboys, I think they might be cooked. So, like, yes, they'll probably beat the Cowboys, but I don't think that's as automatic of a win as everyone's making it out to be. And the 49ers have a really rough rest of the schedule. It's really rough. They have the most games against winning teams. They have, some really, they play a lot of teams that are coming off their bye week, including the Seahawks. I just don't think a lot of things are looking positive for this 49ers team, which makes me happy, but is also my honest evaluation. If you listen in past years, I've told you I think the 49ers are a juggernaut. I've told you I thought Brock Purdy was going to be the best quarterback in the NFC last year. I'm not afraid to say good things about the 49ers. I don't like doing it, but I'm not afraid to do it. I just think the things don't set up well for them. The Rams are the team that I think, again, watch out for. They're 2-4, but they're potentially going to get healthy. They are going to, they're already a potent offense. The defense, I think, is still flawed, but watch out for that team. And as I kind of go through, let me look a little bit at players for those teams. I don't know if you guys are interested in this or not, but I am. I want to kind of go through some different players and how they're performing. First of all, if you just look at PFF grades for teams, the 49ers are still 3rd overall in grades. The Seahawks are 8th in PFF overall. Then you go down to the Rams at 24. Where are the Cardinals? The Cardinals are 17th. Okay, so the Cardinals are 17th in PFF grades. But if we let's look at those Cardinals and let's look offensively. Who's playing really well for them? Well, Paris Johnson, their left tackle, is having a better year. He's having not quite the Charles Cross year, but he's having a good, solid year. James Conner, for me, is their best player offensively, and he's playing well. He's a battering ram. He does tend to get a little beaten up later in the year, so we'll see if he's able to stay healthy the whole time. Kyler Murray's playing okay. I think he's better as a runner than he is as a passer. Trey McBride, obviously, is a good player. Marvin Harrison Jr. is just, I think, has been a disappointment, a pretty big one. One of the things that's, an interesting thing to pay attention to for the Cardinals is they lost Will Hernandez to injury, one of their guards, a big part of their running game. I think that's an issue for them. And then the other guys, their offensive line in general, is struggling a little bit. Kelvin Beachum, their right tackle, is not doing great. He's a decent pass blocker, but not doing great overall. So, I mean, their offense is just like okay. Defensively, that's where I think they've been getting a little bit better performance than I would have expected. And I think some other people would have expected, but they've just got a lot of guys playing okay. Dennis Gardeck was one of the guys that I think got hurt last night. I don't know if he came back on the field. Let me do a quick look on that. So Dennis Gardeck, Sean Murphy Bunting left Monday Night Football. Gardeck, who's their sack leader, had a knee injury and did not return. So that's not good for them. Let me see if yeah, I'm not seeing anything else. I mean, it was just questionable. So, but the fact that he didn't return is not great for them. And Sean Murphy Bunting is another, he's an important corner for them. He's not playing that well, but they don't have a lot of people behind him if he goes down. So, I mean, they don't have a lot of great players. Gardeck's been one of their best and has led them in pressures. I think that the defense inability to create pressure is an issue. They have a playmaking secondary. I think that's better than most people realize. If you look at the Rams, which is a team I honestly I have not paid a lot of attention to, but Jared Verse is kind of like, I mean, Derek Hall is Jared Verse. I think they are very similar players. I'm actually kind of curious where the two of them are different in in grading. So let me pull that up real quick. You guys are like, what are you talking about? You're going all over the place. Well, this is just kind of how my mind works. So Jared Verse right now has a 79.6 overall grade. Derek Hall has a 78.0 overall grade. Jared Verse has a 73.8 pass rush grade. Derek Hall has a 73.5 pass rush grade. Derek Hall has 24 pressures. Jared Verse has 27 pressures. Derek Hall has 5 sacks. Jared Verse has 1. So these are, I think they're very similar players. And they're both super powerful. That's what I liked about Jared Verse. I thought that would play in the NFL. And so far it has. So I like Jared Verse. He's playing well for them. He's certainly talented. Kobe Turner is still a talented player. He's not the dominant player he was last year, but they've got the little inside out there. Their cornerback position is questionable. Their secondary in general is questionable. The defense in general is not great. Braden Fisk, who they traded everything for, 55 grade, 28 tackling, 51.6 against the run. He does have 17 pressures on the year. So Byron Young, who is another big rookie for them, struggling a little bit this year without Aaron Donald to help. He's got a 53.5 grade, 50 against the run. So there's some issues for sure with that Rams defense. Offensively, Jordan Whittington has been another quietly breakout rookie for them. He's playing really well. And then they've got the running back crew. Even this guy, Ronnie Rivers, who's only gotten 30 snaps, has had some decent games. Blake Corum, not a lot of games or a lot of snaps. He's done all right. Tutu Atwell's played pretty well this year. So their offensive line, though, has been not as good as I think a lot of us expected. Steve Avila, the second-year player who moved back to guard, is not doing great. Bo Limmer, who's a rookie playing center, has been okay in run blocking, but really struggled as a pass blocker. Rob Havenstein's been okay. Alaric Jackson's actually been the biggest surprise at left tackle. He's had a strong year there. Kevin Dotson, their big free agent signing, as well as where is he? Jonah Jackson, their other big free agent signing, both struggling, both been injured. And so, yeah, it's been a rough year for them, but I still think that if I'm looking for, where is Matt Stafford? Wow. Matt Stafford has really got a low grade. I did not realize this. Matt Stafford's only had one game where he is graded out above 70, and that was 70.3. Did you guys know this? I didn't know Matt Stafford was struggling this badly. I mean, granted, you've got some receiver issues, some offensive line issues, but that's kind of worth noting. I want to do a little bit more checking here. Let's look at how Matt Stafford's doing when he's under pressure versus when he is not. And let me pull this down to, he's not under pressure a ton, 19th most, but whoa, he is an awful quarterback when he's under pressure. Holy crap. Matt Stafford has a 29.4 grade when under pressure, 30.5 passing grade. Folks, that is, wow. That is dead last among quarterbacks that have played at least 60 snaps. At least 60 dropbacks. Wow. So Matt Stafford really struggling when under pressure. And yes, when he's not under pressure, he's still Matt Stafford, 72 grade, 71 passing. Not fantastic, but better, but still not what he was last year. He was so good last year. I got so much respect for him last year with how he played. It's fascinating. So look, if you want to look at the division and you want to say, what are the things that determine the best teams week in, week out? It is who has the best quarterback. And as of right now, like right this second, I think Seattle has the best quarterback. Brock Purdy certainly has had some bigger highs this year, but he's also had some bigger lows. He's been up and way down. I think Geno Smith is like, he's got to do it against San Francisco in a few weeks, and I think he's gonna. But I think that Geno Smith is the better quarterback in the division. Who has the best pass rush? That's the other thing you look for in, determining who's going to win. Well, I mean, I think that's the Seahawks as well, right? Like, I can look at it a bunch of different ways. So the PFF gives the 49ers a higher pass rush grade. So that is one way to look at it. If we look at who has the highest pressure rate, let's take a look at that. Give me a second to pull it up, and I will tell you who has the higher pressure rate on the season. The Seahawks are 4th in the NFL in pressure rate. Interestingly, the Rams are right behind them at 5th. So worth noting, they have the 49ers at 10th. The Cardinals have got to be way down there. I just don't think their pass rush is, they're 31st. So I think that's not great for the Cardinals. Then you talk about who has got who's able to stop the run the best. I think that's another one, and this is certainly a place where the Seahawks are not going to show up well. If we look at DVOA, let's look at DVOA for run defense in particular. And if we look at run defense rank, the Arizona Cardinals are 10th. That actually makes sense. Wildly, the Seahawks are 17th. So they're above the 49ers. The 49ers are 21st, and the Rams are 26th. So even though the Seahawks have been so bad against the run, from a DVOA perspective, they're 17th. If we go into, let's do a quick look at EPA, since that is another favorite geek tool. If you look at EPA, and we'll look at success rate as well. So rush EPA. Who's the highest? Wow, not a good run defending division. Is that right? I gotta double check this. This doesn't make sense to me. Is that right? The Seahawks at 18th have the highest rush EPA defense in the division. The Cardinals are 22nd. The 49ers are 26th. And the Rams are 28th. What? How can that be? So let's look at success rate. It's another way to look at this. The 49ers are 22nd is the highest NFC West success rate against the run. And it's the 49ers are 22nd. The Cardinals are 25th. The Seahawks are 26th. And the Rams are 28th. Holy crap. Like, what you're finding is that this is like run game's going to matter the rest of the year. And this division does not seem to be able to stop it. So that's crazy. I would have never guessed that. Then I think you talk about who's got their best players and who's healthy. I mean, I guess the Cardinals, but they don't have that many good players, but they're not missing a lot of their best players, I don't think. Let me take a quick look at IR situations for these teams. Hold on one second. Where did my cursor go? I think my mouse wants this show to be over, but I don't. So I'm going to figure out if I can get these batteries to work and get back on. Okay, I'll just use this mouse pad. All right. So if I look at, let me look at the Arizona Cardinals. We're going to look at injury report. We're going to look at IR situations. Elijah Jones. Will Hernandez, as I mentioned, he's a pretty big one for them. Justin Jones was a decently big loss for them. BJ Ojolari, Jonah Williams. So they have some offensive line woes for sure. And then edge rushing woes. And hopefully, we'll see what happens with what's his whacket, Dennis Gardeck. That's another big one. Rams, they are, I think, getting healthier. So Avila is on IR. I actually didn't know that Avila was still on IR, but I think he's coming back. Jonah Jackson on IR. I think he is due to come back. John Johnson, the safety. What is John Johnson's situation? He was playing really well for them. So he was put on IR September 16th and was expected to miss 4 to 6 weeks. So he is expected to come back. Who else? So Cooper Kupp we talked about. Puka Nacua. Latest on him. Trying to see if he's not going to practice ahead of the Raiders game. So they're thinking Nacua would potentially return for the Seahawks game. Is a possibility coming up in a couple weeks. So I didn't realize he was coming that soon, but they're getting healthier. And they just got back Darius Williams, one of their cornerbacks. So they're getting healthier. The Seahawks, I mean, we know their situation. I think generally we'll find out what happens with DK Metcalf, but I think they're in generally pretty good shape. They should get back Uchenna Nwosu. Gonna get back George Fant here in a little bit. Going to get Abe Lucas back here in a few weeks. I would guess the 49ers game after the bye is when, assuming that they activate him. I think they're trying to make a decision this week about Abe Lucas because here's the thing. Once you activate him, his window, he has 21 days, which means that he would only get 2 weeks of practice if they activate him this week because then they have a bye week. And so they're trying to determine if that makes sense to do or whether they should wait a little bit longer. Personally, I'm like, just get the guy active, get him practicing. He'll be ready when he's ready. But they only would have 3 weeks. And so they might want to give themselves 1 more week after the bye. So I think that's probably what they're discussing right now. But the point being, I think the Seahawks are getting healthier and have reason to expect some of their better players to come back. 49ers, as we talked about, they're in rough shape. Dre Greenlaw is going to come back. Christian McCaffrey should come back. Brandon Ayuk will not. Deebo Samuel will come back. George Kittle has been injured up and down the season. They lost Javon Hargrave for the year. So they've had a lot of these season-ending injuries. The 49ers are, I think, in the worst shape of all from an injury perspective. And we'll see. I think if I kind of look at all those situations, it's hard for me to say, yeah, the Seahawks are in anything but the driver's seat. They're already in first place. They don't have the toughest schedule. They probably have the second toughest schedule the rest of the way. They have their bye week still coming up. They should get healthy. I think they have the best quarterback. I think they have the best pass rush. Unbelievably, they have at least similar run defense to the rest of the division. And I think their health is in a situation where they could be getting better. So I think the Seahawks are a team that, as of this point in the season, despite that 3-game stretch, have every reason to dream about winning this division. I think a lot of that's due to the state of the division. Not that the Seahawks are becoming some powerhouse, but it's wide open. It's wide open. And the next few weeks are going to be massive to determining whether the rest of the year is as interesting as I think we all hope it will be. All right, folks. There were a couple things I missed while I was talking, so let me get to those. Italian Knight has become a new member. Super happy to have you. Welcome to the crew. Water Napple says, not counting division games, what game do you think is most crucial for the Seahawks this year? Good question. Let me go back to the Seahawks schedule. Yeah, I mean, it's going to have to be one of these NFC games against the NFC North. So either the Packers or Vikings home game, I think they've got to find a way to win one of those home games. Because they have to win as many of these NFC games as possible to make up for starting out 0-3 in the conference. So that would probably be my guess. I would say the Vikings game. I think that the Vikings game is the one that is probably the most crucial for them to get. And the Packers game at least will be prime time. Maybe they'll get up for that a little bit more, but that's an important one for sure. So really excited to share, if you guys have not already seen this, we've been doing a special deal with JK Boots, local boot maker over there in Spokane, Washington, mom and pop shop that started. The folks came from Ukraine years ago and started this business in Spokane. Every boot is built in Washington by hand. And you use code HawkBlogger, you get 10% off. It is very rare to get this kind of deal on boots this amazing. These are boots that are used by loggers, by construction workers, by forest firefighters, by service members. They are really, really, lifetime kind of boots made with love and care. And the cool thing is, every time you use code HawkBlogger to buy a boot, you get entered to win a one-of-a-kind Seahawks-themed bison blue leather boot. It's going to be very cool. It's going to be made just for your feet or someone you love if you want to give it to somebody else. So every time you use code HawkBlogger and buy a boot, you get entered to win. And when we sell our 10th boot using the code HawkBlogger, we are going to give away a pair of JK boots to the Washington Wildland Firefighters Foundation, to a firefighter to have a great pair of boots to wear while they're fighting fires, keeping our forests safe, keeping the Northwest safe and beautiful, and keeping our homes safe. So it is a win-win-win. I think we've already sold 3 or 4 boots, and if you aren't needing them yourself, if you know somebody who is a firefighter, who works outdoors, who is a service worker, construction worker, any of those things, they'll probably know JK Boots, and they will want this code. Code HawkBlogger gets you 10% off. So make sure whoever is aware of this and takes advantage. It won't last forever, and a really, really special partnership with the Northwest Company. So hopefully you guys take advantage of that. I don't think you'll regret it. All right, folks, we've done it. We've done it again. Another Tuesday is in the books. Love having all of you with me. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your morning. I am Brian Emhauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at HawkBlogger. This has been episode 212 of HawkBlogger Mornings. Take care, y'all.